So let me be very brief. Okay. Okay. So for colleagues who are maybe from other affiliated organizations, this presentation has never been seen publicly, but this is the first time we are able to share with all the diasporians on what we have been doing, especially within the Kenya Kwanza community in terms of diaspora work, and how we intend to position our focus on what needs to be done going forward. We've had the problems, but this is not new to us because we started working on this work 3 years ago, looking at problems of the diaspora, starting from a clean slate. That means looking at where are the issues. We've had many hours of working on a SWOT analysis of diaspora issues. We had a pestle analysis of what the issues are up to the point where we are now. So I'll give you a short preview of what we've been doing, and this might help each of the organizations out there that are also working on the same objective that I'm aware of to see how you can link in with what we've been doing. I must also say that I want to acknowledge the teams that worked behind this, and there are so many colleagues out there who put a lot of effort. So the first issue that we need to understand is where it all started. And I'll just draw you back up to the point where we had the diaspora visit Kenya in December 3rd, 2021. At that point, the diaspora presented to the then Kenya Kwanza candidate, of course, who is now the president, what we call a diaspora roadmap for actually how we can be able to constitute the policy for diaspora. We all know about the policy 2014. I know there are some groups, of course, led by Rosemary and others, who are looking at how to review that policy. And we've already looked at it, but we thought we should start from a clean slate of what the diaspora needs. This then came to a culmination of what we call the Diaspora Charter. You've heard about the Diaspora Charter. This charter has already been drafted. We then reviewed it within the Kenya Kwanza fraternity and submitted for commitment by the Kenya government as we speak today. So this charter has 3 pillars. The first is the issue around the participation and inclusion of the diaspora in political process and also governance. It is definitely true that we need to be on the floor of the House, both the National Assembly and also the Senate, in order to be able to draw out some of these issues that really befit the diaspora all the time. So that's why we thought that is one of the key pillars. We've talked about areas, but I'll expand a bit on this. So that is the first pillar. The second pillar that came out of these issues of the SWOT analysis that we did is how we can promote and mobilize, especially areas of economic welfare, innovation, skills, trade, and investment opportunities. And this, again, is something that has come up from time to time. I think even when Pete Muthoga was talking, I was thinking whether you've seen these slides before. But the point is, that is where we should be. At what point do we actually create both the channels and the ways of how we can engage we in the diaspora to deal with the government of today? And we, within the Kenya Kwanza, thought about this and said, okay, we have to hold the government that comes in because we are diaspora at the end of the day. And my problems are the same problems as anybody else, irrespective of your political affiliation. So that in mind, it was necessary that we do that. So that's another area. Then the third one, which is the last one, is the issue around the social welfare, the issues of social development, culture, and also, just to make it more precise, patriotism. And how do we take care of our Generation Z, as they call them? So this is a very, very important pillar, but it covers quite a number of issues that colleagues in this particular meeting will give some snippets on what is going on. So in summary, for those of you who haven't seen the Diaspora Charter, it has 3 pillars. These are the key pillars. So the question is, what's in these pillars? But before I come to that, let me just give you a rundown of what we've been doing and where we are. So if you look at the manifesto, and I would urge those of you who have got your mobile phones right now, you can scan that barcode. It will give you the manifesto straight away. So if you look at the manifesto has areas where, if you have a question, we'll pick up the questions. I know, Professor Luca, you have something there. So let me just give you a preview. So this manifesto has some commitments that the government had committed to. We all know that, just like any other manifesto that is out there. The question was that we needed to make sure that this manifesto addresses other areas that might not necessarily have been addressed by the party, but were also addressed by other political affiliations. So therefore, it is not lost in translation that whatever is here is a cast in stone. We know that whatever is here might not necessarily be a cast in stone, so that it can be improved as time goes by. So these are the 9 issues that were put in the manifesto to make sure that they address diaspora issues. The question is, if the government in place wants to implement their manifesto for diaspora pillar, they will certainly follow this. So what we asked ourselves is, what can we do to expand what this manifesto is trying to address so that it can be conclusive enough to address our issues? And that is where we are coming from, and that is where we are going. And of course, the inclusion of everybody else in the diaspora is helpful to make sure that we can be able to have a satisfactory diaspora affairs state department that actually addresses issues diaspora, okay? So we started from the point of a working group, and this working group was scoped out. It had the tasks of what it needed to address. So that was the first point, okay? And then the next point was the issue around engaging stakeholders. So we've been engaging within ourselves, that's within the consortium of Kenya Kwanza. But what we want to do is to now go out and engage other political affiliations. For example, there's MEO comrades whom we talk to every day, and other parties and other communities, so that they can be able to rigorously look at the proposals we are putting across and add value, so that we can now then propose to the ministry. So that is what we've been doing. I know we've been quiet for a while, we've not been public on this one, but this is the first time that we are taking this opportunity to share this information with other affiliates so that they can be able to be part of this journey. We know there's a lot of work that is going on, and to avoid duplicity and waste of resources, we want to make sure that we are on one page. So that's what the engagement is all about. And that will run probably between now and November, which is what we are targeting. And then in December, we hope to make sure that we review what we in the diaspora have proposed based on what we have as a baseline, and then review that with the ministry and the structures therein with the ministry to agree that this is what it is in terms of implementing the Diaspora Affairs State Department. Because that State Department has not been implemented. Yes, they have a PS, yes, they have a minister, but that State Department has to be formulated. It has to come together, somebody has to do something. So we need to be there to make sure that we can provide the necessary input into that process. And then the next part is the issue around the validation. We must make sure that it is validated. We must make sure that what we are saying can be achieved. And even if it's not achieved, it should be ambitious enough to be able to allow the government to be able to be held accountable going forward. So that's important. And we hope that validation will then lead to finally the start of the implementation process, which means getting the department set up, getting the right necessary skills in the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs to make sure that they can be able to take us to the next level, because we want the Diaspora Affairs State Department to work for the diaspora. And therefore, we need people who understand the problems of the diaspora, the challenges of the diaspora, what the diaspora requires, what the diaspora's ambitions are, and so forth, so that we can be able to have an aspiration that is also aligned with what the government is thinking of today. And that is only fair that if we are true to ourselves, then we have to interrogate ourselves we have to be able to question ourselves and be able to work seamlessly across each party so that we can bring the best of what we have. And I think that's what we are trying to allude here by making sure that we can open up and have various institutions and individuals who are very well qualified in their own right to be able to be part of this particular solution rather than a problem. So that's the roadmap that we have. We are definitely here. So here is where we are. So as you can see on that particular slide set, that is where we are. The next portion now is to make sure that the summary of the ideas that we put together are shared with the rest of the diaspora. That means the you and me, irrespective of your affiliation. So it doesn't matter whether you are in which political party or you don't have a political party, so long as you're a Kenyan diaspora living abroad, this document will be open to you so that you can interrogate it, you can be able to question it, you can be able to contradict it, so that we get the best of everybody. And that is what we intend to do. It's a log frame that just gives you what the thinking has been behind this. And a few leaders will give us a few comments on that. And that's why we wanted everyone on this particular meeting. So the next thing I want to do is not to really dwell so much, but just to give you a flavor of some of the issues that are within each of the pillars. So I talked about the three pillars. So when you look at the political and governance pillar, there are three specific goals, as you can see there. So if you allow me, I'll try and get so let me get my spotlight on. Okay, so you can see there are three pillars here. So there's the creating of the diaspora ministry. This was our initial thing. And I think the president made a pronunciation of creating a diaspora ministry. We then analyzed and said, we can either get a diaspora ministry or we might end up getting a hybrid ministry, which is what we've got now. So therefore, it is not lost in terms of the aim. The aim is the diaspora ministry, but we have a hybrid, which is a state department in a ministry, which is very common in many countries. So if you go to Ghana, theirs is actually in the office of the president. But if you go to Israel, they have a specific ministry for diaspora. If you go to any other country, so we are aware of these challenges and we are aware of why it is important that we start somewhere. So now we have a state department, which is fair. So that's what we've been concentrating on. What can we do to improve the state department? What can we do to make sure that the state department start addressing our issues? So that's number one, the creation. There will be issues to do with an organogram. There will be an issue to do with, the strategic plan of how it should work. So creating that ministry or state department, what does it require? What departments? Which type of activities? If you look at the other countries, even if you go to Singapore, not Singapore, but if you go to, let's say, the Philippines, or even Mexico, Sri Lanka, and all the others, you find that the diaspora ministry has activities. So these activities have their directors. These directors push and run these activities within the diaspora ministry. And we want something like that. So therefore, that is very important in that goal number one. Goal number two is to improve delivery of government services through decentralization of services and functions for Kenyan missions abroad. I would urge that if you have any question, just raise your hand. I'll give you time and people will ask questions. And I'll pause after this slide so that we can take a few questions and then we continue, if that's okay. And in terms of goal number two, we are talking about services, decentralization of services. We know how the elections were run. We know how the voting, the registration of diasporans, even the civic education that was so poor for the diasporians before the registration for us to vote. We know that. The question is, how do we make sure that service is okay? We have had issues about the embassies not being fit for purpose. They're not giving us the services that we deserve as diaspora, especially when it comes to issues of passports, issues of visas, delays, timelines, and so forth. So the need to have how the embassy provide their services is important. I had a very good discussion with Joseph about the County 48, and there's a need for a structure. Let's be honest, there's a need for a structure. Is County 48 the solution? Maybe. Is County 48 part of the solution? Maybe. So the question is really, let's be honest and be honest with each other and take good ideas from each part and say, how can this service be delivered? I know Rosemary, my friend in Washington, they're very busy saying, well, Services can be delivered by the diaspora if the government wants it. So there is something there. And then there's the establishment of a diaspora forum. This forum is important because we have to have a point in place where the government is questioned. We have to have a point where we say, has the government achieved the objectives that they set to achieve? So using the conference as the platform is important. Let me just go back. Sorry about this. I'll just go back here. I don't know what I should do here. Okay, using the platform is important. And just making sure that the forum, the idea of the forum is to have a point within the year where diaspora comes together through thematic areas to discuss the progress. And I'll give you an example. When we meet at the end of the year, next year, for example, we should come together, people of finance, people of health, people of engineering, people of any other qualification, teachers, community service, doctors, and all that, meet within those thematic areas to say, what is it that is working for the diaspora and what is not working? And how has the government addressed those issues of the diaspora based on the manifesto that they put across? So that's why this meeting is important. And by the way, it should be sponsored by the government. Now, somebody might ask, when the government sponsors an event, then they become skewed towards what should be asked and what should be done. I think we need to get above that and be very honest and be very prudent and be able to question the government, because it's the government in place and it has to serve us. Even if this government is not going to be in place, the next government has to serve us in equal measure. So that's what we are saying this should be. I'll pause there to allow any questions that somebody might have so that we don't have any misunderstanding. I think, Maurice, you're the first one. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for letting me speak. These are very good. These are very good goals. I really like them. I think it's they're doable as well. One of the things that I think there's so many things that we can tackle. So narrowing them down and making them simplified is going to really help us. I'm thinking the goal for the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, I mean, if we are to narrow it down, have like a monthly meeting. By the way, I was part of a group that wrote the diaspora policy paper that has been in circulation. I've seen it being circulated around. So I was part of the group that came up with that diaspora paper. I know Bernard Kavi was part of it as well, and there was other people as well who I'm not seeing here who are there. So delivery of services is a good one, and we have to know what can be done, how it can be done. We have to create structures which are not only going to serve the Kenya Kwanza's government, but it has to be a structure that's going to survive any change of administration. And if we build those institutions, build those networks, I think that's going to help us more. Create community liaisons who are going to be constant. I mean, I'm talking about community leaders. I'm talking about church leaders. I'm talking about people with businesses and those kind of stuff. So those kind of layers have to be around, and especially those layers are going to come in handy when they're recognized in places like the Middle East, where we're having all kinds of issues popping up here and there. So one of the things that I've done, I've discovered in an incident where one of our ladies died in Egypt. I found somebody over there who talked to me about that incident, and they wanted to be a secret. And then I learned from her that that they've been getting those kind of issues, and they've been doing it hush and sending the body home. So that's the reason why we don't hear those issues happening from Egypt, but they actually happen. So if we have systems in place beyond just the embassy, because the embassy is overwhelmed, it has to be set aside. Diaspora affairs have to be totally separate from the embassy, and so that we don't continue to blame the embassy for doing things which they are really not equipped about. We also have to understand that most of the people in the embassy are not even from here. They're not even from the diaspora. They've just been sent to serve the embassy. So if you're going to rely on people who do not have some working knowledge of the locality where they've been posted, it becomes really difficult for them to actually relate with the issues that you're facing. So building the infrastructure, putting the institutions in place, and having people who are going to serve those institutions are going to be a good step to go on. And also a key thing that I also want you to remember, Dr. Koyabe, is we have to go beyond just the current government. It has to be institutions that we're going to make sure are going to survive every change of regime. And I did not support Kenya Kwanza in the previous, in the campaigns. So maybe after this meeting, you guys are going to send me packing, but I'm happy to participate and to engage and to help in the creations of this if I'm invited, because I think I do have some experience that can come in handy. And I worked with the IEBC when they came into the US. I was able to meet with Dr. Nyang'aya, and I spent like Nyang'aya is not very popular in the Kenya Kwanza circles, but I was able to spend time with him and the whole IEBC team. And I saw the problems they were having.
Maurice, sorry. I know. I just wanted to be generous, but if you allow me, let's finish this, and then there's actually a session where we are going to allow these interventions.
Let me finish the thought, and then I'll let it be.
Sure,
okay?
Sure.
So what I noticed about the IBC is the plan that they had to register voters was unworkable. It has to be organic from us, and then we deliver to them. So that's what I wanted to make. That's the point I wanted to make there. Thank you.
Yeah, Asante. I know there are other colleagues who want to talk. Rosemary, 1 minute, and then of course Lucas. I think you didn't talk, and then Robert, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Dr. Martin Koyabe. At least I'm calling you with the right names. You called me with the wrong names, and I'm in New York, not in Washington, D.C. You're my friend, but at this point, I don't think we are friends anymore, because inaonekana ni kama umenisahau. But no pun intended, we are still friends, ndugu yangu. I wanted to ask if you can share with us this presentation, because it's a very important piece of document that we need to probably interrogate a little bit, add, public participation, add in our comments, breathe life into it, because at the end of the day, like you've said, Kenya Kwanza UDA has formed the government. We are all in government now. We need to support. We need this thing to work. And as the Secretary General Veronica has said, we in the diaspora need to come up with the issues and also define the solutions. My bone of contention is also, I like what Joseph contributed in terms of creating a database, because we have quite a number, and you very well know that, Martin. We have quite a number of diaspora organizations. We just need to organize ourselves so that we are not stepping over each other, and one is not feeling is better than the other. Oh, mimi ndio organizer, One Voice Consortium, I'm a County 48. By the way, County 48 threw me out of their groups and what have you, but it's all good. Sawa sawa. So let me yield my mic and say that tuko pamoja. I am ready to support. I've been in this part of the world for many years, I dare not mention, but Niko hapa, and I work very, very closely with the Generation Z, because that's where we should have our focus. And, they did not vote a critical mass. Maurice Ndole and I and others hold on Twitter Spaces every Tuesday. Find time, 9 p.m. to join us. We always have current issues that affect Kenya, that affect the global. Please join us, because we need to keep this thing. Tuko pamoja, serikali we formed the serikali. So let's work together to really realize some of the things that we've been yearning for. Back to you, Martin.
Asante sana for that intervention. I know, as we've said, we'll make sure that we share this document. In fact, the way we want to do it is to go even a step further. We'll share with the log frames. That means showing the objectives of each of these goals, what activities have been identified, what sort of responsibility, which organization will be responsible. And these are proposed ideas from ourselves. And then also who will fund, where, and how that will be. So we'll go a step further in terms of the details of what we'll share, more than what I'm sharing right now. So that's something that we are going to do going forward as of now. Professor Lucas, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. It's been an amazing meeting. I really appreciate the way you've organized it and coordinated the meeting. It's unfortunate that I couldn't speak in the first session, but if you don't mind, I'll still bring what I wanted to say then. But before I do that, I just want to commend the working group and the discussions and the trajectory in which you have taken. Yes, as you have said, this is not exhaustive, so it hasn't covered everything. But maybe I just want to highlight, just like a colleague who spoke earlier, I'm also from the economics background. And I feel that one of the areas that has really not been recognized by previous regimes, although we've really tried to push, and I really hope that the current regime will see that, is our economic, both socioeconomic contribution and capacity. So it's the contribution and the capacity that we have. How can this be crafted? Because I think that the only unique group of Kenyans who have that exclusive capacity, and when I say exclusive capacity, is because we have the privilege of living in the Western world where most of our needs are taken care of. And when I talk, I don't know much of how the US is organized, but in Europe and UK in particular, the social welfare benefit and other benefits are already there. So we can be able to move several miles in supporting our country and our families. And maybe that's why our remittances are quite high, because we feel that responsibilities that would ordinarily take while we're in Kenya are already taken by the governments where we live, and therefore we're able to extend that aspect. So two things that I really want the working group consider, and if given opportunity, I would like to drive this. One is the formation or the consideration of an act of parliament to form the Diaspora Development and Investment Board or authority, or whatever other title it may be given, which would be an authority that brings in almost a quasi-parastatal operation and gives the professionals in the diaspora a legal mandate enacted by the Act of Parliament to drive, just as one of my colleagues spoke in the other section, to drive these things, because we fully understand them, both from a professional point of view, but also from a pragmatic point of view, because we have done them. I think that would be one of the greatest gain that our State Department would have. All the other departments, both state departments and sometimes full ministries, have either the Kenya Tourist Boards, Agricultural Irrigation Board, and all these other boards. We have more foreign direct returns or remittances into the country. And with such a board, we could be able now to harness that and even propel and reach to those Generation Z and other markets that are in the West in a more organized and structured way. So that's point number one. Point number two that I would like seriously considered as we formulate the State Department of Diaspora Affairs is what the president has already launched. I think he did that within the first 10 or 15 days of his office, housing solutions for Kenyans. In his declaration in one of the meetings, he said he'd like to work with private sector and work with other sectors to provide more housing. Now, it would be very appropriate if we as the diaspora people, who most of us are planning to go back at home at one time or another, were given that privilege to partner. There are two cities that are already ongoing at the moment, the Diaspora University Town, which is in Taita Taveta, and the proximity point city of return, also known as Wakanda City in Malindi. Some of the challenges we face are not financial. They are more to do with administrative challenges, things like approval, recognition as projects of strategic national importance, and the like. Could there be a framework that helps us also to benefit from things like the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company and other funding finances that are there, maybe in putting of infrastructure and supporting that? If that was also framed, because we are also Kenyans, but just living outside Kenya, if it was properly framed, then there could be significant benefits and progress. initially the moral support and just that structural support, and eventually in some of the investments. So those are critical things that I think if more discussion is made, could really give us a leverage, and we may not depend entirely on some of the things that maybe many other departments in the state departments in the country will be depending on. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, thank you for that intervention, Reverend Professor. And what we're going to do is, I know my colleague, Dr. Jason, he's the one who is looking after that economics pillar and has taken note of some of these issues. For the others who have raised their hands, I know Bernard, Mai, and others, just give me a minute. Let me go through this so that when we finish, you can have the intervention, because time is of the essence, and I've just been warned we need to hard stop at a certain point. So just the next pillar, if you allow me, is the one for economic trade, investment, and there's also skills and innovation in this pillar. And it addresses a number of issues, which I don't want to go into detail. My colleague will look at that. May I just request that we mute? I know so many of us might have their microphones on. Please just mute. So essentially what we have here is, first of all, to establish either new or enhance these trade and investment channels. I think we've talked about the infrastructure bond for quite a while. There's talk about the diaspora bond and others that can be created so that we can have a variety of investment channels going forward. There are other areas, for example, the formation of Exim Bank, similar to what they have in China, but for Kenya. There's also formation of other institutions, as you rightly pointed out. An institution such as the one you've just talked about, Reverend Professor, is very, very important, a quasi parastatal, but also private sector type of institution, which can be able to focus on bringing in the diaspora much, much closer to not only the government, but also to investment opportunities and other issues in the country. So that is something we've looked at, because we looked at forming a parastatal sometimes has almost the same problem. So you introduce another red tape, another bottleneck, another area where money has to be put in, and then you end up with almost nothing. So what we want to do is to really have a very carefully well thought organization, or even an independent organization that can work with the diaspora ministry to complement some of these issues. The other one is goal number 2, which is the issue of accreditation and endorsement. I think the idea about the Kenyan education, the skill sets that we provide, and how our students, and indeed the people we teach, are prepared for the challenges outside there is wanting. I always use this example. I mean, if you go to Scandinavian countries, I think Stockholm is one good example where some of their theses are based on problems on the streets. And it's a very easy concept, because what that means is that if that thesis is completed, at least there's a solution ready to be taken to the market. So whether those are things that we need to look at in a Kenyan context, and how our skill sets are, is also something we need to look at. And also, more importantly, in terms of how it accesses other qualifications outside. There's the issue about portability. We've talked about portability of our investment. So for example, if you, that means, sorry about this. So if, let's say, you got your skills and innovations, how do you make sure that those resources are available from the diaspora and international setup? I think this is something that we've also discussed quite a bit. There's also issues about promoting the Kenyan brand and appointing brand ambassadors at some point. But that sector and that pillar, and my colleague Jason will talk a little bit more. That's why I'm just going very quickly on it, but it's a very important pillar, as we well know it. The last one is the issue around the welfare and areas that are very, very close to us in terms of social development and culture. And in this pillar, there are a number of issues that we've looked at that we have expanded in this goal. We all agree that we spend quite a lot of money in funerals and other areas of our loved ones when they die or they're sick. And the point is, could there be an insurance framework or somewhere where you can put your money and guarantee that your relative gets the treatment they require? Or even when you have a problem abroad, you can be able to address it without necessarily going for fundraising. And I know the community leaders who are listening have done a lot of tremendous good work. Friends and family, we all spend every year money to take our loved ones home. I've experienced that personally, and I know how heavy that can be. So therefore, the point that we're raising here is having a framework that allows us to be able to put something aside that guarantees the best of our families and friends when they're having problems. We've talked about Kenyans in distress. This is something that has really been put in the media, especially in the Gulf. And I thought the leader from the Gulf really putting across to Veronica one of the most pertinent issues of where a family can't travel because the passports are not ready, and for the reason that they have been given, sometimes it's very feeble. So the question here really is the government really ready to react and respond to emergency calls and distress calls of Kenyans wherever they are? What are the mechanisms that are being put in place to make sure that this is done? My understanding is that, for example, right now, we do have what we call the Kenya Labor Management Bill, which 2021, which is still being debated. Will that bill be good enough to take care of our sisters and brothers who go to countries where they're subjected to unwanted treatment, and also put in levels of deplorable accommodation, deplorable situations that we know very well are inhuman and below what we call the basic human rights. So these are things that we need to look at as the diaspora and urge the ministry to be able to expand on those. The other one is goal number 2, which is engaging sportsmen and women. This one actually addresses more than just sportsmen and women, but also with eminent Kenyans. We know very well that we have eminent Kenyans outside our country. They do quite a lot, but rarely do we even tap them to tell them, come and engage us in what we are doing nationally. I think there's tons and tons of examples that have been given out there. I know of my former schoolmate who actually designed the signaling system for the underground in London. And this guy, I mean, with all due respect, yes, we recognize him outside, but has he actually been even able to help the SGR be better? The question is, was he even asked to do that particular job? And I know of Sri Lanka, where their engineers, and I know Sri Lanka has issues at the moment, but their engineers and some of the best brains that are outside are always called into government projects to be part and parcel of the solution. So they provide the ears and eyes for the government to make sure that a project is done up to the standard that it requires, using the skill sets that the country has invested in. So the question is, does the country, like Kenya, for example, have the appetite to do that? Anyway, I've tried to make sure that I go as quickly as I can in areas that are important. What I'll do is I'll stop there and allow my colleagues, and I know I'll call them up one by one, and I think, Donga, you'll call them one by one, to just make some interventions into some of the areas, give a perspective so that we can be able to conclude this session going forward. What we commit, and on behalf of the chair, is that we shall share what we've presented. We will go further and share what we call log frames of some of the areas that have been expanded by the teams and the working groups. We are only having to do one more session just to make sure that we can get an approval internally so that we can share with you. And so, Rosemary, for that question about sharing, and others who have raised it, I think we'll make sure that we address those issues and share with the diaspora for comments. And then we can add more people in those working groups so that they can add value in the formation of some of the pillars that we've just talked about. So I'll stop there, Chair. And with your permission, we'll go into the next phase where we'll call on a few individuals to be able to give their perspective on the areas that I've talked about. So over to you, Ndoka.